They were dragging her toward the door when he walked in. 2 security guards, both hands, her feet barely touching the marble. The entire west corridor froze. Zara did not scream, did not fight. She held her head up and let them move her because she had learned long ago that dignity was the only thing nobody could physically remove. Min-jun Kwon stood in the doorway and watched them drag his housekeeper through his own home. He stepped aside to let them pass. Then he turned and looked at his wife for a very long time. Nobody in that hallway breathed. Zara Monroe had worked in the Kwon estate for 14 months. 14 months of 5:30 mornings and 11-hour days. 14 months of knowing which rooms to finish before the household woke, which surfaces needed 2 passes because Mrs. Kwon ran her finger along the baseboards when she thought no one was watching, and which corridors to clear when the arguments started behind the closed doors on the 2nd floor. She was 38 years old, 5'9", dark brown skin that held the light like polished wood. Natural hair pinned back in a neat twist at the base of her neck. Hands that had not been soft since she was 22. She was not the kind of woman people looked at twice in a room like this one. That was the point. In a house full of people paid to be invisible, Zara had turned it into something close to an art form. She knew the geography of that estate the way she knew her own reflection. Every corridor, every draft, every corner where sound carried further than it should. If you are new to this channel, welcome. Please like this video, hit subscribe, press that bell so you never miss a story, and drop your location in the comments below. I want to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. The Kwon estate sat on 4 acres of land on Chicago's North Shore, behind iron gates and an oak tree line so thick you could not see the house from the road even in winter.
12,000 square feet of white marble and dark walnut, and ceilings so high the sound of your own footsteps came back to you like a question you had not meant to ask out loud. 11 staff members in total, a chef, 2 kitchen assistants, a groundskeeper and his 3-man crew, 2 personal assistants who answered only to Mrs. Kwon, a driver, a rotating night security team, and Zara. They did not socialize. In houses like this one, socializing was how you lost your job. Zara had understood that in her first week and filed it away next to everything else she had learned about the Kwon household. Things nobody had told her. Things she had simply watched and understood and never repeated. She was good at that. Watching, understanding, not repeating. It had kept her employed for 14 months in a house where the average staff member lasted 6. It had started, as most things in that house started, with Mrs. Kwon in a difficult mood and someone in her direct path. That morning it had been a vase, a white ceramic vase on the hall table near the east staircase, positioned 3 inches further left than Mrs. Kwon preferred it. Zara had moved it by accident. She had been carrying a laundry basket and her elbow caught the corner of the hall table. The vase had tilted. She had caught it, one hand, clean, the basket still balanced against her hip, and set it back in place without breaking her stride. It had taken 4 seconds. The camera in the east hallway had recorded all 4 of them. Eleanor Kwon, née Palmer, 41 years old, born into Connecticut money and married into something considerably more complicated, had watched that recording at breakfast with her reading glasses on and her coffee going cold. She had watched it twice. Then she set down her cup, folded her napkin, and called both security guards into her sitting room. By 11 in the morning, they had their instructions. By 11:15, they were looking for Zara. They found her in the West Wing library, on her knees, cleaning the baseboards with a cloth and a solution she mixed herself. White vinegar, warm water, 3 drops of lemon oil. The smell of it had something in the cold morning air of that room. It reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen on Georgia Avenue. Sunday mornings, light through yellow curtains, the radio playing something low and old. She had been thinking about that, about her grandmother's kitchen,
about the way the floorboards used to creak near the back door, about a place that no longer existed in the form she remembered it, when the footsteps stopped behind her. She looked up. Both of them, standing at the library door. "Mrs. Kwon wants you out," the taller one said. "Now." Zara set down her cloth, stood up slowly, pressed her palms flat against her thighs. "I would like to speak with Mr. Kwon." "Mr. Kwon is not available." "Then I will wait until he is." That was when the taller one took her arm. She did not fight. That was the thing the people in that hallway would remember later. She did not fight. She kept her chin up and her face still, and she let them walk her through the length of that wing as though she were choosing to go with them, as though the whole thing were proceeding exactly as she intended. The staff members they passed pressed themselves against the walls. A kitchen assistant found something urgent to study on the floor. The groundskeeper, a quiet man named Harold who had worked the estate for 9 years and had once lent Zara his umbrella without being asked, stood in the middle of the hall with his cap in his hands and watched with an expression that looked very much like shame. He did not move. Nobody moved. That was when the front door opened. Min-jun Kwon did not walk into rooms. He arrived in them. 44 years old, 6'1". A charcoal suit cut precisely for his frame, not purchased off a rack, cut and fitted and finished, with a white shirt open at the collar. Dark hair, black at the roots and silver at the temples. A face that had been handsome once and was now something more than that, defined and settled, with deep-set eyes the color of black coffee that moved across a room the way a camera lens moves. Slow, deliberate, missing nothing. He had the particular stillness of a man who had not been surprised in a very long time. He stopped when he saw them. 3 full seconds of complete stillness. His eyes moved from the guards to Zara's face to the hands on her arms. Then he stepped aside, let them pass, watched them walk her through his own front door. The January air hit her at the base of the front steps like something solid. January in Chicago. Her uniform, a simple gray dress with a white collar, offered nothing against it. She planted herself at the bottom of those steps and breathed. In, out. The iron gates at the end of the long drive were closed. No coat, no bag, no phone. All of it inside. Her coat on the hook in the staff room, her bag in the small locker beside it, her phone charging on the shelf above. She had been on her knees cleaning baseboards when they came. A muscle in her jaw moved once. Then she started walking toward the gate. She did not look back at the house. She did not look back because she had learned, from her grandmother, from years before this house, from 14 months of 5:30 mornings in a place that treated her like furniture, that looking back cost you something you could not always afford. Inside the house, in the west corridor, Min-jun Kwon had not moved from the spot where they had passed him. Eleanor came down the staircase with her arms crossed and her chin lifted and the expression she wore when she had done something she fully intended to defend. She was careless with the vase. "No," Min-jun said. She caught it. The words were quiet, completely flat.
The way still water is level, not because nothing is beneath it, but because everything is held in check. The camera recorded it. The silence between them after that was not empty. It was full of years, full of things said in rooms smaller than this one, full of the accumulated weight between two people who have run out of the ability to surprise each other. Eleanor's jaw moved. "She is a housekeeper, Min-jun. I can dismiss staff without—" "Go upstairs, Eleanor." Not a request. She held his eyes for 3 seconds exactly. Then she turned and walked back up the staircase without another word. Min-jun stood in the empty hall for a long moment after her footsteps faded.
Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out his phone. He scrolled to a name. Not his lawyer, not his head of security, not anyone from his organization. A name that would have meant nothing to Zara Monroe. The call connected before the second ring. "It is time," Min-jun said quietly. He looked at the closed front door. "Find out if she has somewhere safe to go tonight." A pause. "And pull the full file, the one with her grandmother's name on it." He ended the call, stood in the long marble passage in the silence of his enormous house, and looked at his hand. It was not entirely still. The gate opened automatically as she approached. Some circuit or timer, not a kindness. Zara walked through it without slowing down. Outside the iron fence, the road was empty in both directions. Oak trees on either side, bare of leaves, their branches crossing overhead like the skeleton of something large. The sky was the flat white of a Chicago January that had stopped promising anything days ago. She walked. Her feet in their flat work shoes were already feeling the cold through the soles. The gray uniform dress ended at the knee. She had been warm all morning in the heated house. That warmth was gone now, used up in about 90 seconds on these steps.
She did not run through what had just happened. She did not replay the corridor scene, or the look on Harold's face, or the way Min-jun Kwon had come down those stairs with her chin lifted. She set all of it aside the way you set down something heavy, deliberately, carefully, in a place where it would not break. Practical things first. That was what her grandmother had always said. Ruby Monroe. 72 years of hard mornings, and she had never once led with the feeling. Practical things first. Feelings are loyal. They wait. The nearest business district was a mile and a half north. Zara knew that from the mornings she had sometimes walked to a small market on her day off rather than wait for the estate's grocery delivery. A mile and a half was nothing. She put her head down and walked. The cold had found its way through the thin fabric of the dress by the time she reached the first intersection. She crossed without waiting for the light. There were no cars. There was almost no one on this stretch of road. This was a neighborhood of estates and private drives where people did not walk. Where walking meant you did not have a car, and not having a car meant something about who you were. Zara had long since stopped being bothered by the things that other people read into a woman walking alone. She thought about her phone. Everything she needed was on it. Denise's number, her bank app, 3 months of messages from a temp agency she had been in contact with before the Kwon job. She thought about her coat, which was a good one, a long charcoal wool she had saved 3 paychecks for. She thought about her bag, which had $40 in cash in the inside pocket, and a library card, and a photograph of her grandmother taken in 1987 that Zara had carried for 16 years. She thought about the photograph most. Everything else could be replaced or recovered. At the corner of Sheridan Road, she found a gas station with a payphone she was not entirely sure would work. It did. She called Denise's cell from memory. She had memorized it years ago on the theory that a number you cannot remember is a number that cannot save you. 3 rings. "Hello?" Denise's voice, warm, a little rough from the morning, the voice of a woman who slept hard and woke slowly. "It's me. I don't have my phone." A pause. Then, without asking anything, "Where are you?" That was Denise, 43 years old, worked dispatch for a medical transport company, lived in a second-floor apartment on the south side with a rescue dog named Captain, and a standing offer to Zara of the spare room whenever she needed it. They had known each other since they were both 20, working the same hotel on Michigan Avenue in jobs that paid just enough to make staying feel reasonable. 20 years of knowing someone changes the texture of a phone call. Zara gave her the intersection. Denise said 40 minutes. It was closer to 35.
Zara sat on the curb outside the gas station with her arms wrapped around herself and watched a single crow work at something on the far side of the road with the focused determination of a creature that had no interest in anything outside its immediate task. She watched it for a long time. When Denise's gray sedan pulled up and Denise watched through the window at the gray uniform dress and the bare arms and the calm face, she did not say anything for a moment. Then, "Get in." She had the heat on full and a spare jacket from the back seat across Zara's lap before they had gone half a block. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" "Later." Denise nodded and drove. That was the other thing about 20 years. The silences were furnished. You could live in them without discomfort. Back in the estate, the corridors had returned to their ordinary rhythm. Harold had gone back to the grounds. The kitchen assistants had returned to their stations. The personal assistants had retreated to their offices on the second floor, where Mrs.
Kwon kept her schedule and her correspondence, and the exacting order she imposed on the hours of her day. Eleanor Kwon stood at the glass of her private sitting room on the second floor and watched the driveway. The gate was closed. The woman was gone. Eleanor's phone was in her hand. Her thumb moved to a contact, not her husband, not the estate manager, not any of the people whose numbers came up when other people looked at her call history. Thomas Reeves, her cousin, her family's lawyer for 31 years, through 3 generations of transactions that never quite made the news. She pressed call. 1 ring. "Eleanor?" "She's been removed." Her voice was even. "From the property." A pause. "And the file?" "He has it." She turned away from the window. "He's had it for 2 years and done nothing with it. That won't change." Another pause. Longer. "You're sure?" Eleanor looked at the door of her sitting room. On the other side of that door was a house that ran on her precise instructions. Every surface, every schedule, every person on the property. All of it arranged exactly as she required. 14 years of careful arrangement. "I'm sure," she said. She was not sure. That was the thing she would not say out loud. She had watched her husband stand motionless at the end of that hall and look at the closed front door after the woman was gone. She had seen the look on his face. She had been married to Min-jun Kwon for 12 years. In 12 years, she had learned to read the language of his stillness. What she had seen in his face in that corridor was not indifference. It was the expression he wore when he had already decided something and was simply waiting for the right moment to move. She ended the call, set the phone face down on the table, and studied her own reflection in the sitting room glass, neat, composed, absolutely controlled, for a long time. The city moved at the edges of her vision. The gate at the end of the drive stayed closed. Across town, in a gray sedan heading south on Lakeshore Drive, Zara Monroe was looking out the passenger window at the lake. February flat and steel-colored, stretching to a horizon that was not distinguishable from the sky. She was thinking about her grandmother's kitchen again, about the photograph in her bag that was still sitting in a locker in the staff room of a house she had just left for the last time, about the way her grandmother used to fold dish towels, in thirds, always in thirds, a habit from a job she had held for 9 years in a house not so different from the Kwon estate. "Practical things first," Ruby Monroe used to say. "Feelings are loyal. They wait." Zara pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the car window. She would get the photograph back. She would get all of it back. She just did not know yet how large the word "back" was going to turn out to be. Min-jun Kwon arrived at his downtown office at 7:15 the next morning. The Kwon Group occupied floors 22 through 25 of a glass tower on Wacker Drive, import and export on 22, private equity on 23, real estate acquisitions on 24, and the executive floor on 25, where Min-jun kept an office that faced north toward the lake and said, in its precise emptiness, everything that needed to be said about the man who occupied it.
No photographs on the desk, no awards on the wall. A single piece of calligraphy his mother had given him in 1998. 4 characters he had long since stopped needing to translate, because they had been on that wall so long they had become part of the visual texture of the room, the way the lake was part of the frequency of the view. His assistant, a Korean-American man named James, who had been with him for 7 years and who communicated primarily in efficiency and the occasional raised eyebrow, set a coffee on the desk and withdrew without being asked to. Min-jun sat. He did not open his laptop, did not pick up the coffee.
He opened the top drawer of his desk and removed a folder. Not particularly thick, perhaps 30 pages, held together with a black clip. No label, no reference number. Anyone who opened that drawer and found it would have assumed it was a routine property summary. There were dozens like it in the cabinets along the east wall. This one was different. He had kept it in the desk drawer for 14 months. Not in the filing system, not in the secure archive on the server that only 2 people in the building could access. In the desk drawer, within reach of his hand, because he was the kind of man who needed to know that certain things were exactly where he left them. He opened it. The first page, a property record from Cook County. Address, 4119 South Michigan Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Lot dimensions. Legal description. Transfer date, September 14th, 2011. Transferred from Ruby Etta Monroe. Transferred to Palmer Reeves Real Estate Holdings, LLC. Consideration, $47,000. Min-jun looked at that number for a moment. $47,000. In 2011, that lot, 3/10 of an acre on a south side block that had been quietly appreciating for years, was worth at minimum $140,000. By the time Min-jun had first seen this record, in the autumn of 2022, it had been folded into the assembled parcel that anchored the Kwon Estate's property portfolio at a valuation of $4.2 million. He turned the page. The notarization certificate for the transfer. Notary Public, T.J. Reeves. Date stamped September 14th, 2011. He turned to the third page. A hospital discharge record, obtained through a contact whose methods he did not examine closely. Patient, Ruby Etta Monroe. Admission date, September 9th, 2011. Discharge date, September 19th, 2011. 10 days. The transfer had been executed and notarized while Ruby Monroe was in the hospital. Min-jun had looked at this page many times in 14 months. Each time, the arithmetic settled in the same place. He turned to the back of the folder. The last document was a copy of a photograph, taken by the investigator he had hired, of a framed print hanging in a dining room on the south side. A woman in her 50s, photographed in front of a house with a small porch and a window box. She was looking at something off to the left of the camera, laughing at something. Her left hand was raised in a gesture that was either greeting or emphasis, hard to say which. The light was afternoon light, summer, golden. Beside her, about 15 years old in the photograph and 6 inches taller already, was a girl with natural hair and a serious expression and hands that were, even then, not soft. He had known who Zara Monroe was before she walked through his front gate 14 months ago. He had known because he had been looking. He closed the folder, set it on the desk. His phone rang. The screen said, Sung-jun, his brother, 2 years younger, handled the legal infrastructure of the Kwon Group from an office in the building's 23rd floor and worried about everything the way a man worries when he truly understands how much there was to worry about. Min-jun picked up. She called the estate asking about her belongings, Sung-jun said without preamble. Through Harold. Harold gave her his cell number? Apparently. Min-jun said nothing for a moment. Make sure her things are returned today, all of them. Have Harold take them.
Min-jun. A pause. Eleanor is going to ask. Eleanor is going to ask nothing about this. Handle it. A longer pause. The file, Sung-jun said. Are you moving? Min-jun looked at the folder on his desk. He had built a life on timing, on understanding the precise moment when the weight of a thing tipped from potential to inevitable. 12 years in a marriage that had been a transaction from the first day, her family's connections to the Chicago real estate establishment, his capital.
A mutual understanding that what they were building was an edifice and not a home. He had told himself in those early years that it was a reasonable arrangement, that such arrangements could be honorable. He had stopped telling himself that in year 4, when Sung-jun had first shown him the full picture of where Eleanor's family money had come from. He had sat on the knowledge for 8 years. He was not proud of that. There were things he had told himself during those 8 years to make the sitting bearable, that he was protecting an organization that employed over 200 people, that moving on incomplete information would create more harm than good, that patience was not complicity. He had been very good at believing those things when he needed to. He was less good at it now. The fracture in the marriage had not been one moment. It had been a long series of small, accurate observations on both their parts, adding up to a total that neither of them could honestly deny by year 6. They had continued anyway, not from feeling, not from habit exactly, but from the shared inertia of 2 people who had built too much together to easily account for the rubble. Eleanor had her reasons for staying. His name on certain documents opened doors that her family name increasingly did not. The Palmer reputation in Chicago legal and political circles had been quietly declining for years. Too many whispers, never enough proof. The slow atmospheric shift that precedes a reckoning. Min-jun had understood that she was using him as a buffer. He had let her. That was the part he could not argue away. He had let her because the arrangement still served his interests, and he had told himself that the timing was not right. And he had put the folder in the desk drawer and called it strategy. He turned from the window. He sat back at the desk. He opened his laptop and pulled up the employment record the agency had sent 14 months ago. A single-page file. Clean work history. No gaps of concern. The application had come through the domestic staffing agency the estate used for all household positions. He had made one call to the agency before the normal vetting process ran. One call, to ensure the application was prioritized. He had not told anyone he had made that call. He found the address field on the employment record. South Side. He closed the laptop. Not yet, Min-jun said. When? He looked north toward the lake through the glass, flat and gray and patient. When she is ready, he said. Sung-jun was quiet for a moment. She doesn't know any of this. I know. She may not want. I know, Min-jun said again. That is her decision to make. He ended the call, picking up the coffee James had left. It was still warm. He drank it standing at the window, his gaze north, thinking about a woman walking through iron gates in a gray uniform dress, with January coming for her from every direction. He had watched her walk, had seen the set of her shoulders, the line of her spine. She had not glanced back. That detail had stayed with him through the night. 12 years of watching Min-jun Kwon operate in a world that required performance at all times. The display of wealth, of taste, of the bred superiority that old money trained into the people it made, had given Min-jun a precise understanding of what it looked like when dignity was constructed. What he had seen in that corridor was not construction. It was the real thing. He set down the coffee cup, opened his laptop, typed one name into the search field of a database he paid a significant annual fee to access. Angela Marsh, civil rights attorney, South Side. He read for 20 minutes. Then he closed the laptop. He would not be calling Angela Marsh.
That call was not his to make. His phone buzzed twice in the 10 minutes after he closed the laptop. The first message was from Min-jun. Eleanor's people are moving. Palmer assets transferring. You need to act now.
The second was from Park. The Palmer family attorneys filed 2 motions in Cook County this morning. If you want to use what you have, the window is narrow.
Min-jun read both messages, set the phone face down, sat at his desk without moving. 3 floors below, in the 22nd floor open plan, the morning's first calls were starting. Voices, movement, the low hum of an organization in motion, responding to information, adjusting, scrambling toward the next thing the way organizations always do. He was still. It was the stillness of a man who had decided that the next move was not his, that not every open window was his to climb through, that some things, the right things, moved at the speed of the person they belonged to. And the person this belonged to was on the south side, in a spare room, with a blue plastic box and 14 months of 5:30 mornings and a grandmother's handwriting on a piece of plain paper. She would move when she was ready. He could wait. 2 weeks passed. Zara found a job on her 4th day, a home health aide position through an agency she had worked with 3 years before, assigned to an elderly woman named Mrs. Adkins, who lived in a first-floor apartment on South Prairie Avenue, 8 blocks from where Zara was staying in Denise's spare room. Mrs. Adkins was 81 years old, moved slowly, spoke precisely, and had opinions about everything, including the correct way to fold the morning newspaper, the appropriate volume for daytime television, and the moral character of anyone who put their elbows on the table during a meal. She reminded Zara of her grandmother in none of these particulars, and all of them at once. The work was different from the estate, personal, close. Mrs. Adkins needed help with the morning routine, with meals, with the medications lined up in their exact sequence on the kitchen counter, the counter that had a dish towel hanging from the oven handle with a small red thread unraveling from the corner.
Mrs. Adkins had been meaning to replace it for months. Zara noticed it on her first morning and kept noticing it. The way you keep noticing a thing that belongs in its place, even when it is slightly worn. She did not replace it. It was not her towel to replace. By the end of the first week, Mrs. Adkins had told her the oatmeal was too thick, the telephone voice too bright, and the newspaper folded in the wrong direction. Zara adjusted all 3 without comment. By the end of the second week, Mrs. Adkins had described her late husband in precise and fond detail, complained about her daughter in Phoenix with equal precision and equal fondness, and mentioned a specific brand of hand cream she had used for 40 years and could no longer locate in any pharmacy in the neighborhood. Zara found it online and ordered 2 bottles. Mrs. Adkins looked at them when they arrived. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "No," Zara agreed. Mrs. Adkins put them in the cabinet without another word. But the next morning there was a second cup of coffee waiting on the counter. That was the texture of the work, small and close and human. Nothing like the Kwon estate, where the scale of everything kept you at the required distance from anything that resembled actual connection. She had always preferred this, though she had spent years in rooms that punished the preference. Denise asked her twice in the first week what she was going to do about the Kwon situation. "Nothing yet," Zara said both times. Denise, who had known her for 20 years and therefore knew the weight of the word yet, did not push further. On a Thursday afternoon in her second week, Zara took the Red Line to the Randolph/Wacker station and walked 4 blocks to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds office on Clark Street. She waited 22 minutes in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights.
Then she requested the property record for 4119 South Michigan Avenue. The clerk returned with a printout in 4 minutes.
Zara sat at one of the public reference tables and read it. The transfer. September 14th, 2011. Ruby Etta Monroe to Palmer Reeves Real Estate Holdings, $47,000. She read it twice, then a third time. There were things that looked right and things that did not. The notarization date was what caught her first. September 14th, 2011. She turned the date in her mind the way you turn a key to see which way it fits. Her grandmother had been in Rush University Medical Center from September 9th through September 19th of that year. A fall, a broken hip that had started a slow chain of other complications. Zara had been 25 years old and had driven up from Tennessee, where she was working at the time, on September 10th, and had not gone back for 6 weeks. She had been in Chicago, staying at a neighbor's house for those entire 10 days. She would have known if her grandmother had left that hospital. She took photographs of the record with her phone. She took the train back to Denise's apartment and sat on the edge of the spare room bed and opened the storage box she had brought with her from a unit she rented by the month. A blue plastic box, battered at the corners, that she had carried from address to address for 16 years. Her grandmother's things. Letters, most of them. A small Bible with the spine repaired with electrical tape. An envelope of photographs. Property tax receipts. Ruby Monroe had kept every one of them, a neat stack going back to 1979, the year she bought the house on South Michigan. And at the back of the box, in a manila envelope that had not been opened in years, a document Zara had not thought about since the period after the funeral. A letter from a law office, dated October 2010. She opened it. The letterhead said, Southside Housing Rights Coalition, Legal Division. The letter was addressed to Ruby Monroe. The language was formal, but the meaning was plain. They were aware of a pattern of predatory property acquisition targeting homeowners in several Southside neighborhoods. They had identified her address as potentially affected, and they were offering free legal consultation. Her grandmother had never responded. Zara held the letter for a long time. The spare room was quiet. Captain, Denise's dog, had settled himself in the doorway with his chin on his front paws and was watching her with the patient attention of a creature who understood that some human activities required respectful silence. Zara folded the letter, set it on the bed beside the property record, looked at both of them. Then she picked up her phone and searched. Southside Housing Rights Coalition. The website was modest. A header photograph of a community meeting, a mission statement, a page of recent news items, a contact form. And a name. Executive Director, Constance Webb. Zara clicked on the contact form. She wrote 3 sentences. Sent it. Then she stood up, stretched, and went to the kitchen to make dinner, because her grandmother had taught her that the body required feeding regardless of what the mind was doing, and she had a morning shift at Mrs. Adkins at 7. 40 minutes later, as she was washing the pan, her phone buzzed. A reply from Constance Webb. Not the form auto-reply, a direct email, personal address. 7 words. Come in when you can. I know. Zara set the phone on the counter, looked at it again. Across town in the Wacker Drive Tower, a man named Jerome, who was paid to observe and report, had photographed Zara entering and leaving the Recorder of Deeds office. He had emailed the report and the photographs to David Park at 6:15 that evening. Park had forwarded it to Min-jun with 1 line of text. She went to the recorder's office. She found the transfer record. Min-jun read the message at his desk at 7 in the evening. The office dark around him, except for the lamp. He had expected this to take longer. He had perhaps underestimated her. He set down the phone, closed his eyes. 3 seconds of complete stillness.
Then he opened them, picked up the phone again, and typed back to Park. Pull everything Reeves has filed in the last 90 days. Everything. He needed to know how much of a move Eleanor had already made, because the woman on South Michigan Avenue had just shown him that things were moving faster than his timeline. And in his experience, things that moved faster than your timeline had a way of moving entirely past you if you were not already in motion. Mrs. Constance Webb was 67 years old, had been doing this work for 31 years, and had the quality of a woman who had heard every version of every story and still found each one worth her full attention. She met Zara at the door of the Southside Housing Rights Coalition on a Tuesday morning. A storefront office on 47th Street with 2 desks, a filing cabinet that had seen better decades, a whiteboard covered in names and addresses and dates, and a coffee maker that actually worked. She shook Zara's hand and looked at her for a moment with the direct assessment of someone whose stock in trade was reading people accurately and quickly. "I know your grandmother's name," Mrs. Webb said. "I know her address. And I know that transfer was not right." They sat at the desk by the window. The morning light came through the glass at a low angle and fell across the desk and the files and the 2 women and the coffee cups between them with the ordinary indifference of Tuesday morning light, which does not distinguish between ordinary days and the days that turn out to matter. Zara studied the whiteboard while Mrs. Webb opened the file. Names and dates going back years, organized in a shorthand she was just beginning to decode. Addresses, transfer dates, entity names, initials she did not yet know.
The board had the quality of a long and careful argument that had been building for decades, waiting for enough pieces to become undeniable. She had walked into the middle of an argument that had been going on since before she was paying attention. She did not say this out loud. Mrs. Webb opened a file, not a thin file, a file that had been built over years, added to carefully, organized by someone who understood that the weight of a case lived in its documentation. "Palmer Reeves Real Estate Holdings," Mrs. Webb said. "Thomas Reeves. The Palmer connection is through Eleanor Palmer. She married a Kwon about 12 years ago. You may have heard of them." Zara said nothing. Mrs. Webb looked at her. "You worked for them?" "For 14 months. Mrs. Webb was quiet for a moment, not surprised. She had already known this, but giving the information its proper weight. "Then you know more about that household than most people who've been looking at this. What exactly are you looking at?" Mrs. Webb turned the file toward Zara. 17 properties, 17 families, Southside addresses going back to 1998, each one transferred to Palmer Reeves or a related entity at prices that ranged from half to a third of assessed value. Elderly homeowners, most of them, some with health complications at the time of the transfer, some with family members who had later disputed the sales and found themselves up against a legal apparatus that cost more to fight than the properties had been worth. Ruby Monroe's name was on page 4. Zara found it and read it without expression. The documentation beside it included the same hospital record Zara had put in her blue plastic box. Whoever had assembled this file had the same information she had. And then one more document she had not seen before, a handwritten note on plain paper in handwriting she recognized the way you recognize a smell from childhood. 3 lines, her grandmother's careful cursive. "They came to the hospital." A man and a woman. They said I owed money on the house, and if I signed the paper, they would make it stop. I did not want to make trouble. Zara read that note for a long time. I need to pause here. When I wrote this scene, I had to set it down and walk away.
Because this is not just a story. This happens. It has happened. And I wanted to do it justice. Stay with me. The coffee maker made a sound in the corner. A bus went past outside. Your grandmother tried to reach out afterward, Mrs. Webb said quietly. She called our office twice in 2012. Both times she reached a volunteer, not a lawyer. Both times she was told someone would call her back. Did anyone? Mrs. Webb's jaw moved. No. Zara folded her hands on the table in front of her. How many of these 17 families have legal standing to move forward? Mrs. Webb received the question with the respect it deserved. 6 with clean documentation. Your grandmother's case is one of them. With the hospital records, the notarization date, and this note, you have the strongest evidentiary position of any file in here. Zara read the whiteboard across the room, names and dates and addresses in black marker. 31 years of someone deciding this work was worth doing even when it was slow and expensive and lost more often than it won. Who owns the land now? Technically, it was incorporated into the Kwon Estate's property portfolio in 2015, but the title chain is traceable, and a fraudulent transfer doesn't generate clean title regardless of how many subsequent transactions. I understand. Mrs. Webb watched her. You've done this before? I've been in rooms where people talked about this before, Zara said. I paid attention. There was a brief silence. Mrs. Webb? Constance. Constance. The Palmer family. Eleanor Kwon's family. How deep does this go? Constance Webb regarded her with the expression of a woman who had been waiting for someone to ask this question for a long time.
Deeper than the 17 properties, she said. She stood and went to the filing cabinet. She came back with a second folder, older, the edges soft with handling. Cook County Property Transfers, 1994 through 2011. Palmer family entities. There were 6 of them over the years, changing names, same principles. 41 properties across the south side and parts of the west side. 41 properties. 41 families. Zara thought about that for a moment. 41 families. 41 sets of property tax receipts in boxes that had been carried from address to address. 41 grandmothers and parents and people who had owned something that was taken from them in the language of paperwork and legal process and the cold patience of people who understood that small predations, done quietly enough, rarely get corrected. And the Kwon Group's real estate portfolio, Zara said. Constance held her gaze. How much of it is built on Palmer acquisitions? A long pause. A significant portion of the legitimizing layer, Constance said carefully. The properties that gave the portfolio its North Shore and Near North footprint. The respectable face. They were assembled 2013 through 2016 from Palmer Reeves Holdings. Zara sat with that for a moment. Min-jun Kwon had married into this, had built on top of it, had employed her for 14 months. She fixed her eyes on her grandmother's handwriting on that piece of plain paper. They said I owed money on the house, and if I signed the paper, they would make it stop. I did not want to make trouble. Zara's voice, when it came, was very steady. She didn't make trouble, she said. But I will. Constance Webb was quiet for a moment across that battered desk. Then she reached into the second folder and pulled out a business card. A lawyer. Southside practice. Angela Marsh, she said. She has been waiting for a case strong enough to open the full picture. I think yours might be it. Zara looked at the card. Did not pick it up yet. Tell me everything you know about Thomas Reeves first. Thomas Reeves contacted her 11 days later. Not through Constance Webb directly. Through the Housing Coalition's public inquiry form, which meant he had been looking for her through the one channel she had used that was semi-public. The message was brief and carefully phrased. He described himself as Eleanor Kwon's former legal counsel. He said he had information relevant to her family's property situation. He said he was prepared to act as a witness. He said he was sorry for his role in what had happened. Zara read the message 3 times. Then she called Constance. I know who he is.
Constance said. "Tell me." "Thomas Reeves, 63 years old. He and Eleanor Palmer grew up in the same house in Greenwich, Connecticut. He is not her former counsel. He is her cousin. He has been the Palmer family's lawyer since 1993. Zara was quiet. "He's not a whistleblower." "He has never whistled a thing in his life," Constance said. "Then why is he reaching out?" "Because Eleanor knows you found the recorder records. And she knows about your contact with this office. And she is moving to close you down before you move." Zara looked at the message again. "He'll have something for me to sign. I would bet my filing cabinet on it." She met him on a Wednesday, a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue, his suggestion, which she accepted because the location was public and she had no intention of going anywhere private with Thomas Reeves. He was already there when she arrived. 63, as Constance had said, silver-haired, a suit that cost money, the kind of face that had been trained since childhood to project trustworthiness, which meant it had the quality of a mask that fit very well. He was already standing when she approached, extended his hand. She shook it once. They sat. He was good. She gave him that. He led with the apology, not perfunctory, not rushed. He took time with it.
He described specific transfers, specific moments when he had known it was wrong and done it anyway. He held her eyes and let his voice carry the appropriate weight. She listened without moving. When he finished, he reached into his briefcase and removed a folder. He set it on the table and opened it. Her grandmother's name at the top of the original deed, the transfer papers, the notarization certificate, T.J. Reeves, September 14th, 2011. The date that could not be the date because Ruby Monroe was in Rush University Medical Center. And one more document, a page she had not seen before. Her grandmother's signature on the transfer itself. She looked at that signature for a long time. She had her grandmother's letters in the blue plastic box. 16 years of birthday cards and notes, and the careful cursive that Ruby Monroe had learned in a schoolroom in Georgia in 1949 and had used without variation for the rest of her life. The capital R with its distinctive backward loop. The way the M sat low, modest, close to the page. The signature on this document was not her grandmother's handwriting. It was close. Close enough to fool someone who had never watched Ruby Monroe write. Not close enough to fool someone who had. "I need to use the restroom," Zara said. She picked up her bag. In the restroom, she photographed every document in that folder. 7 photographs. She checked each one. Clear, legible, all text visible. She came back to the table, sat down. Reeves had a second document ready. She had known there would be one. A release form, printed on letterhead from a firm she did not recognize. Not Palmer Reeves, a new entity. Clean paper, clean logo. The language was dense, but the meaning was not. She was agreeing to accept $85,000 in full settlement of all claims arising from the transfer of 4119 South Michigan Avenue. She was agreeing to release all claims against all named and unnamed parties in perpetuity. She was agreeing to disappear. The coffee shop moved around her. Someone laughed at the next table. A young woman with a red coat, laughing at something on her phone. The sound bright and entirely separate from this table and this folder and this moment. A barista called a name, steam from the espresso machine. Zara thought about her grandmother's kitchen. Sunday mornings, yellow curtains, the radio. The exact smell of the floor cleaner Ruby Monroe mixed herself. Lemon and vinegar and something warmer underneath. She thought about the dish towel at Mrs. Adkins with the red thread unraveling from the corner, and how her grandmother had kept every property tax receipt from 1979, a neat stack,
because Ruby Monroe understood that paper was proof, and proof was what stood between you and the people who wanted what you had. Practical things first. Feelings are loyal. They wait. Zara closed the folder. She did not touch the release. She picked up her bag. She looked at Reeves one more time. Really looked. At the sympathetic eyes and the careful hands and the face that had been executing transactions like this one for 30 years while telling itself a story about legal complexity and family loyalty and the way the world required certain arrangements. He looked back at her. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not guilt, exactly. A brief flicker. The look of a man who has just understood that the person across the table is not going to do what he planned. He had one more argument ready. She could see it in the way he drew a small breath. She was on her feet before he could use it. "I'll be in touch," she said. She walked to the door. She did not look back. Outside, the air was cold and clean. She walked 2 blocks before she stopped and planted herself on the sidewalk and took a full breath. Let it out slowly. $85,000. The land was worth $2.3 million. She had the photographs. She had everything.
That night, Min-jun Kwon received a text from David Park at 9:47 in the evening. 3 words. She didn't sign. Min-jun stood at the window of his penthouse on the 41st floor. Below, Chicago ran in every direction. Lights, bridges, the black curl of the river, the lake dark beyond everything. He had not sent Reeves. He read the text again. Eleanor had moved without telling him, had moved directly against Zara, using the one man who connected all of it, the family, the transfers, the paper trail, and had done it while Min-jun was watching from a distance and calculating. He picked up the phone, called Eleanor. She answered on the second ring. "I know," she said before he could speak. "She didn't sign. It's not over." "Eleanor." "I handled it." "You sent Reeves." A pause. "He was always going to be a part of this." "He was always going to be a liability," Min-jun said. "And now he has shown her documents, and she has seen his face, and she knows exactly who he is to you." "She doesn't know." "She knows everything," Min-jun said. The words were quiet, completely level. "She has known for some time, and now she has photographs of everything Reeves put on that table." A very long silence. "How do you—" "Go to sleep, Eleanor." He ended the call, stood at the window. He had held this position for 2 years, watching, assembling, timing. The chess player's posture. Every piece in place, every move calculated, the endgame drawn in his mind with precision. And while he had been playing chess, Zara Monroe had walked out of his house with nothing, and in 11 days had found the file, located the coalition, read her grandmother's handwriting, photographed Reeves's documents, and refused $85,000. He thought about her in the West Corridor that morning 14 months ago, moving through his house like she was somewhere else entirely, and only her body was present. He had read that as restraint. He was reconsidering. What if it was not suppression at all? What if it was simply what she was doing, moving through a space while her attention was fully occupied elsewhere? Not suppressing something, already somewhere else, already ahead of him. He put his phone in his pocket. He was going to have to tell her the truth, all of it, including the part that did not reflect well on him. David Park was 40 years old, Korean-American, had passed the bar on his first attempt, and had been Min-jun Kwon's attorney for 11 years. In that time, he had handled matters that required the rare skill of a man who could hold significant information with perfect steadiness and speak about it in language that was accurate,
complete, and entirely without drama. He delivered drama now. Min-jun sat across from him at the conference table on the 25th floor. The lake was in the window behind Park's head, gray and direct. Reeves has been operating as a conduit between Eleanor and a new Palmer entity since March of last year, Park said. Not Palmer Reeves. That name is done. Too much exposure. A new LLC registered in Delaware, Pinebrook Property Group. Registered to whom? Eleanor's brother. On paper, the capital structure is hers. Min-jun looked at the table. She has been moving assets. Since the Tribune reported on the Housing Coalition's 17 property documentation 18 months ago, quietly, steadily, transferring Palmer holdings into the new entity, distancing herself from the Palmer name. How much? Approximately $14 million in real estate assets. Min-jun was quiet. And Reeves. He executed all of it. 42 transactions in 18 months. He's the thread that connects everything. He is. Park looked at him. And he just sat across from Zara Monroe and showed her original documents from the Ruby Monroe transfer, including your 2012 acquisitions memo. Min-jun went very still. The memo. Your then chief of acquisitions.
Marcus Webb, no relation to Constance Webb. He flagged the Palmer-Reeves transfer irregularities in a June 2012 internal review and recommended no further inquiry. He reported directly to you. I was not in Chicago in June 2012. You were in Seoul for 6 weeks. The memo went up the chain. Your deputy reviewed it and signed off. On my behalf. On your behalf. Park folded his hands. The document exists. It has your organization's letterhead. It has been in the Palmer file for 12 years, and Reeves showed it to her. The room was very quiet. The lake sat in the window, indifferent as always. Min-jun studied the conference table for a long time. He traced the grain of the wood. Walnut, dark and even, the same wood as the halls of the estate on the North Shore where he had stood 14 months ago and watched 2 men walk a woman through his door and out into the January cold. She photographed it, he said. She photographed everything, including the memo. Including the memo. He had not known about the memo. That was the truth. In June 2012, he had been in Seoul, settling a business matter that required his full attention for 6 weeks, and Marcus Webb had reviewed a property file and made a judgment call and signed off on something that should have been escalated. Marcus Webb had been gone from the organization since 2019. Heart attack. Nothing to do with any of this. The paper existed regardless. It bore the Kwon Group name, and Zara Monroe had it on her phone. What does she have on Reeves specifically? Park said, the original deed, the transfer with the forged signature, the notarization certificate dated during her grandmother's hospitalization, the release form he tried to get her to sign, and the 2012 memo, the forged signature. Yes, Reeves executed it himself. We believe he used a signature from an earlier document Ruby Monroe signed in 2009, a routine acknowledgement of a property tax notice. He traced it. Min-jun picked up his pen, set it down, picked it up again. He was aware of the pen in his hand and set it down deliberately and did not pick it up again. What does she need to file a viable civil case? She already has it. Park met his eyes evenly. With the hospital records establishing she could not have signed, the signature comparison, the notarization irregularity, and the documented pattern through the Coalition's 17 property file, she has a case that will hold. And the memo? The memo is collateral damage. It is not the center of her case. But it will surface in discovery, and it will be in the public record. Min-jun was quiet for a long time.
He had spent 2 years assembling the full picture of what the Palmer family had built. He had sat on that picture, using it in his own mind as leverage in what he had always known would be a difficult divorce, a negotiating position, something to trade. He had kept a woman's grandmother's stolen property in his desk drawer like a playing card. He looked at his hands. They were completely still. That stillness, this time, carried no decision in it. It was the weight of a man sitting with what he had done. He was not, by nature, a man given to self-examination. He had built his life on the assumption that clarity of purpose and precision of execution were sufficient moral frameworks, that if you understood what you were doing and did it cleanly, the accounting could wait. The accounting was here. He had watched a woman be dragged through his own home. He had stepped aside. He had called Park and asked him to find out if she had somewhere safe to sleep. He had told himself that was care. It was the smallest possible expression of care, the kind that costs nothing, the kind that allows the person exercising it to feel something without doing anything. He had held the truth about her grandmother's property for 2 years. He had watched her clean his house for 14 months.
He had known that every surface she polished, in every room she entered, was in a building that sat on land assembled from her grandmother's home and dozens of others like it. He had said nothing. He had been waiting for the right moment. The right moment for whom? He did not answer that. I know what you are thinking right now. You want him to have a better answer than silence. So did I when I wrote this scene. I kept trying to give him one. But the most honest version of this man, the version that makes what he does next mean something, is a man sitting in a dark office, understanding exactly what he traded and who paid for it. Stay with me, because what he does next is the only answer that matters. Eleanor called while he was sitting there. He turned the phone face down. She called again. He left it. He pulled the folder from his inside jacket pocket. He had started carrying it with him now, not in the desk drawer, and opened it to the last page. The photograph of Ruby Monroe in front of her house, laughing at something, her hand raised. The girl beside her, serious expression, hands that were already at 15, not soft. He sat with it for a long time. Then he closed the folder. "Set up a meeting," he said. Park waited. "With her?" "Yes." "She may not set it up," Min-jun said. And Park, "Yes?" "Prepare the full document package. Everything in the file. Everything we have on the Palmer transfers, Reeves, the Pinebrook entity, the asset movement. All of it. For the meeting. To give to her. No conditions, no agreements, no signatures." Park was quiet for a moment. "And if she doesn't want to hear from you?" Min-jun looked at the lake. "Then I have made the offer," he said. "And whatever she chooses to do with it is her decision to make." He stood up. "It was always her decision to make," he said. "I just took too long to understand that." Mrs. Webb's office on 47th Street was not the kind of place Min-jun Kwon was accustomed to entering. He arrived on a Thursday morning in a car he drove himself, not the town car, not the driver. A plain sedan from the building's parking structure. He wore a gray coat over a dark suit. No visible markers, nothing that announced itself. He pushed open the door of the storefront. The bell above it rang. Mrs. Webb was at the desk by the window. She glanced up. She took the full measure of him in about 3 seconds. The coat, the suit, the face, the deliberate way he occupied space. She had seen photographs, had done her research. She knew who this was. Zara was at the back desk, her coat on the chair beside her, a notepad in front of her,
and her phone face down on the corner. She raised her eyes. The moment between them when their eyes met was not long. Mrs. Webb set down her pen. "I'll give you the room," she said. She stood, picked up her coffee, and walked past Min-jun to the door. She paused as she reached him. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then she went outside. The door closed. The office was quiet except for the coffee maker in the corner, which was laboring through its cycle with the sound of something that had been asked to do this too many times. Min-jun took in the room. The 2 desks, the whiteboard, the filing cabinet. The names and dates and addresses in black marker. He sat down across from Zara at the folding table. She watched him, did not speak. He placed the folder on the table between them, and then he talked. He told her about the Cook County property record he had first pulled in October of 2022. He told her about the hospital discharge record. He told her about the investigation he had commissioned, the photograph, the signature comparison, the full documentation of the Palmer family's acquisition pattern going back to 1994. He told her about hiring her. He said it plainly. He had known her name before she submitted the application through the agency. He had reviewed her background, confirmed she was Ruby Monroe's granddaughter,
and ensured that her application moved to the top of the pool. He told her why. He had wanted her close while he built the case. Had wanted someone who had direct knowledge of the household in the event that Eleanor moved the Palmer assets before he could act. Had thought, and he said this without looking away from her face, that proximity would protect her. He said it and heard it for what it was, a man telling himself a story that served his purposes and calling it protection. He told her about the 2012 memo, about Marcus Webb, about what the memo would mean in any legal proceeding. He told her about his plan to use the file as leverage in the divorce, the chess player's calculation, the playing card he had kept in a desk drawer while a woman moved through his house for 14 months, not knowing she was walking across ground that belonged to her grandmother. He told her all of it in the same level voice he used for everything. He did not soften any of it with tone or pacing. He gave it to her plain, the way you give someone something heavy, by setting it directly in front of them rather than trying to manage how it lands. It was the most honest he had been in a room in 12 years. He was aware of that and did not remark on it. When he finished, the coffee maker had completed its cycle, and the room settled into a stillness that was different from what it had been before he started. Fuller, heavier, the kind of weight that accumulates when a significant amount of truth has just been placed in a small space. Zara had not moved. She looked at the folder on the table between them. The same manila document that had lived in his desk drawer for 14 months while she cleaned the halls of his house and learned which surfaces needed 2 passes and which corridors to avoid when the arguments started behind closed doors. 14 months. One person in that house had known exactly who she was from the first day, and had used that knowing for his own purposes, while calling it something else. She looked at him. "You hired me," she said. "Yes." "You knew who I was before I walked through your door?" "Yes." "For 14 months?" "Yes." She rose. The chair made a small sound on the floor. She picked up her bag. She looked at the folder. "Get out," she said. Not loud, not theatrical, the way a person says a thing they mean completely, without decoration, without performance, from a place so certain that raising the voice would only diminish it. He stood. He picked up his coat from the back of the chair. At the door he stopped. He did not turn around. "The documents are yours," he said. "All of them. Park will deliver them to whatever attorney you choose. No conditions, no agreements, no signatures required." He waited. She said nothing. He opened the door.
The bell rang. He walked out. Mrs. Webb was on the sidewalk with her coffee cup, looking at the street. She did not look at him as he passed. He got in the car. He sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. He had made one play in 12 years that was not calculated. This was it. Inside the office, Zara stood at the folding table. The folder was in front of her. The coffee maker ticked as it cooled. She was breathing. Even. Steady. She thought about 14 months of 5:30 mornings and 11-hour days. She thought about polishing surfaces in rooms she was not supposed to exist in. She thought about Harold's face in the corridor, the cap in his hands, the expression that looked like shame. She thought about her grandmother's handwriting on a piece of plain paper in a folder that a man had kept in his desk drawer for 2 years. I did not want to make trouble. She stood very still for a moment. She was not angry. That surprised her, until it did not. Anger required an expectation that had not been met. She had not expected anything from Min-jun Kwon.
Had not expected anything from anyone in that house, except the next day's work and the paycheck at the end of the week. When you did not expect things from people, their failures landed differently. Not lighter, just differently, without the sharper sting of believing they were capable of more. He was capable of more. That was the thing she had to sit with now. He had seen her, had known who she was, had watched what she was, had moved towards something like justice and then used it as a chess piece instead. A man who could see clearly and still choose to look away until it was convenient. She had known that type. She had worked for that type for 20 years. The ones who were not cruel, who would never raise a hand or a voice, but who were capable of a quiet, bloodless kind of harm because the harm cost them nothing, and the correction cost them something. He had corrected it. That was real. She was not going to pretend it was not real. It was just not enough to be a conversation she needed to have today. She had a call to make. She picked up her phone. She turned it over in her hands once. Then she opened her contacts. Angela Marsh. 3 rings. "This is Angela?" "This is Zara Monroe," she said. "I'm ready to file." The complaint was filed in Cook County Circuit Court on a Tuesday morning. Angela Marsh had the paperwork complete in 4 days from the initial call. She had been waiting for this case for 2 years, and the documentation was thorough enough to build on from the first day. The complaint named Palmer Reeves Real Estate Holdings, Pinebrook Property Group, Thomas Reeves individually, and Eleanor Palmer Kwon individually. The Kwon Group was not a named defendant. The 2012 memo would surface in discovery. That was unavoidable, and both Zara and Angela knew it. But the memo showed a failure to act, not an act. The case against Eleanor and Reeves was direct, documented, and clean. Zara had reviewed every word of the complaint on a Sunday evening at Angela's office on Cottage Grove. The two of them at the conference table with coffee and the full file spread between them. Angela walked her through each allegation: fraudulent transfer, elder financial exploitation, forgery, and the evidentiary basis for each. Zara asked questions, good ones. Angela noted them without visible surprise. "You've done this before," Angela said at one point. It was not quite a question. "No," Zara said, "but I've been paying attention for a long time." Angela looked at her for a moment with the brief, steady expression of a lawyer who has learned to take people exactly as they present themselves and trust that information. "Good," she said, "because what happens after we file is going to require all of it." Zara understood. She had not come this far expecting the easy part. The complaint was filed at 9:15 Tuesday morning. She was at Mrs. Adkins' apartment by 10. She helped with the morning routine, made the oatmeal at the right thickness,
folded the newspaper in the correct direction, lined the medications in their precise sequence on the counter beside the dish towel with the unraveling red thread. Mrs. Adkins said nothing about any of it. At 11:30, over tea, she said without looking up from her cup, "Whatever it is you did this morning, I hope it worked." Zara looked at her. "How did you have the same face my daughter had the day she filed for divorce," Mrs. Adkins said. "Like someone who has finally done the thing they should have done a year ago and is not sure yet whether to feel relieved or terrified." Zara was quiet for a moment. "Both," she said. Mrs. Adkins nodded once and picked up her cup. By 4 that afternoon, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune named Karen Osei had found the complaint in the public filing system. By 7 that evening, she had called Angela Marsh for comment. By the following morning, the story was online.
The headline was careful, measured. The kind of headline that lawyers read and recognize as meaning, "Everything here is documented, and we are not afraid of a defamation suit." The article named the Palmer family, named Reeves, named Palmer, Reeves, and Pinebrook, cited 17 documented transfers through the coalition's records, named Ruby Monroe as the plaintiff's grandmother. It did not name Min-jun Kwon. It named Eleanor Palmer Kwon. Eleanor's phone rang 41 times in the 24 hours after the story published. She answered none of them. Her personal assistants began responding to press inquiries with a standard no-comment statement by Wednesday morning. She called Min-jun 11 times on Tuesday. He took none of the calls. On Wednesday afternoon, she arrived at the Wacker Drive Tower. James, who had worked for Min-jun for 7 years and who communicated primarily in efficiency, looked at her arrival with the complete neutrality of a man paid to see nothing. "He's available," James said. She took the elevator to 25. Min-jun was at his desk when she entered. He turned. Eleanor closed the door behind her. She had slept perhaps 6 hours in 2 days. Her composure, the careful exterior she had built and maintained over 12 years, over a lifetime of being told that how you appeared was what you were, was not broken. She did not break easily. But it was showing its architecture, the places where it was held together rather than solid. Her hands were moving. "Make it stop," she said. Min-jun looked at her. "I can reach out to my contacts at the Tribune. I can, Eleanor, have the filing challenged on procedural." "Eleanor!" The word was not loud, not sharp. The way a door closes, complete, final. "It is done." She stared at him. "You are going to let her?" "She has documentation of a forged signature on a transfer that was executed while the owner was hospitalized," he said. "She has the notarization record. She has 30 years of your family's acquisition pattern documented by a housing rights organization. She has a civil rights attorney who has been preparing this case for 2 years. There is nothing to stop." He held her gaze. "It is done." Her hands were still moving. Her gaze went to his desk. The folder was visible at the edge. She did not know what was in it, but she had seen him reach for it once, months ago. In a moment he had not known she was watching. "You helped her," Eleanor said, quiet, certain. "I gave her what belonged to her," Min-jun said. Silence. Eleanor looked at him for a long time. 12 years. A transaction from the first day. Both of them knowing it, neither of them speaking it. An edifice built on calculation and connection and the mutual understanding that love was not what either of them had signed up for. She had underestimated one thing. She had assumed that his precision, his cold, patient, methodical precision, was always working for him. She had not considered that it might, one day, work against her. She had also assumed, and this was the deeper error, the one she would not examine closely for a long time,
That the woman she had thrown out of the house in January was someone who needed saving, someone who would be waiting for a powerful man to act on her behalf. The woman had not waited. The woman had walked through those iron gates with nothing and had found every piece of it herself. Eleanor turned and walked to the door. It did not close quietly behind her. Min-jun turned to the window. Chicago, lit and indifferent. His phone buzzed. A text from Park. Palmer family attorneys have made contact with Marsh. They want to settle. Min-jun read it, set the phone down. He thought about Zara Monroe standing at the base of the front steps on a January morning with no coat, looking up at a flat white sky that did not promise anything. He thought about the set of her shoulders, the line of her spine.
He had watched her walk toward that gate, and he had thought, in that moment, that it was the most precise definition of bearing he had ever seen. Power, he had come to understand, was loud by necessity, because it was always afraid of being questioned. Dignity was quiet, because it had nothing to prove, and nowhere it needed to be except exactly where it already was. He had spent 44 years building the first kind. He had watched her walk away carrying the second kind in a thin gray dress in January, with nothing but herself. He picked up the phone. He texted Park back. Tell Marsh her client will respond by Friday. Do not offer anything on our end. This is her case. He put the phone in his pocket. He went back to the window. The lake was there, as always, patient as land. Below, on the street, Eleanor Palmer Kwon was getting into a car, and the door was closing, and the car was pulling into traffic, and Chicago was moving around it with complete indifference, the way cities always move around the private disasters of the people inside them. 3 months later, the Southside land came home. The settlement took 6 weeks to negotiate. Angela Marsh was not in a hurry. She let Eleanor's family attorneys understand, through the precise language of someone who did not need to raise her voice, that the documented case was airtight, and that a trial would be public and detailed and would include 30 years of acquisition records across 41 properties. The Palmer family attorneys were in a hurry. The terms: 4119 South Michigan Avenue, the original lot, 3/10 of an acre, returned to the Monroe estate and deeded to Zara Monroe as sole heir. Damages of $320,000. Legal costs. A separate acknowledgement, not public, of the fraudulent nature of the 2011 transfer. The 17 other families in Constance Webb's file received a referral to Angela Marsh's office, and the benefit of the full documentary record Zara's case had placed in the public file. Constance Webb, on the day the settlement was signed, sat at her desk on 47th Street for a long time after everyone else had left. The whiteboard still had the names on it. She did not erase them yet. She looked at them for a while. 31 years of names. The ones that had moved forward and the ones that had not. The ones she had reached in time and the ones she had not. Then she picked up the eraser and started with Ruby Monroe. The divorce between Min-jun and Eleanor Kwon was filed 2 weeks after the Tribune story. The proceedings took 4 months and were handled with the shared grimness of two people dismantling something that had never been warm enough to grieve. Eleanor retained the Connecticut house and a portion of the investment portfolio she had brought into the marriage. Min-jun retained the organization, the downtown office, the international interests. The North Shore estate went into the settlement inventory. The Kwon Group lost 3 major contracts in the 2 months after the story published. 2 board memberships were quietly dissolved. The legitimacy layer, the respectability that the Palmer connection had provided, the North Shore address, the charitable board seats, the dinner party invitations, dissolved with them. He was left with what he had built himself. It was still considerable. He was left with it in a city that now knew more about him than he had intended. He accepted this.
He did not make public statements. He did not ask for understanding. He dismantled what needed dismantling and rebuilt around what remained, and went back to work. In April, on a Tuesday morning, Zara Monroe stood on the land at 4119 South Michigan Avenue for the first time. The morning was soft. April in Chicago after a wet March. The ground giving slightly underfoot.
The air carrying the smell of earth and distance. An empty lot on a block that had changed many times since 1979, some of it for better and some for worse, the way blocks in cities always change. The house was long gone, demolished in 2013, the lot sitting vacant since, weeds and a few stubborn trees, a fence along the back property line. She walked to the middle of it. She had no plan yet. She had thought about a community garden, had thought about a small structure, a reading room, something like that, something her grandmother would have recognized as useful and decent and worth maintaining. She had thought about a place where people could sit with a book or a problem or a cup of something warm and not be required to be anything other than present. She had thought about letting it be land for a while, just land, belonging to someone it was supposed to have belonged to all along. She had not decided. For the first time in a long time, not deciding felt like something other than a failure, like a space she was allowed to stand in. She thought about her grandmother buying this lot in 1979, 23 years old, working 2 jobs, saving the down payment in an account at a Southside bank that had since closed, folded into something larger, that had since folded into something larger still, signing her name on the ownership papers in her careful cursive, planting the window box, keeping every property tax receipt. 41 years in that house. Zara pressed her gaze into the ground. The land remembered nothing. That was not a sad thought. It was an accurate one. The land simply was what it was. 3/10 of an acre on the south side of Chicago, carrying its history in its soil the way all land carries history. Silently, without judgment, available to whoever was standing on it at any given moment. She was standing on it now. She heard footsteps on the sidewalk behind her. She did not turn around right away. She had known he might come. She had decided, over the weeks since the settlement, that she was not going to prevent him from coming if he needed to. Min-jun stopped a few feet behind her. He did not say her name. He said nothing for a moment, looking at the same lot, the same weeds and bare trees and the back fence and the April sky above it. "I am sorry," he said. Not for the specific thing he had done wrong, for all of it, the whole accumulated weight of all of it. She understood that. She fixed her eyes on the ground in front of her. "I know," she said. They were both still for a while. A truck went by on Michigan Avenue, 1 block east. Somewhere nearby, a dog was voicing an opinion about something. The hush of a plot of land. Not silence exactly, but the quality that open ground holds in the middle of a city. A different register of sound, as if the land itself is still doing what land does regardless. "What will you do with it?" he asked. She considered the question honestly. She gave it the respect it deserved. "Something she would have recognized," Zara said. He nodded once. He turned to leave. "Min-jun?" He stopped. She still did not look at him. "The file," she said. "You could have used it against Eleanor years ago. You didn't." A pause that was not empty. "I was waiting," he said. "For what?" He held the words for a moment. "For the right person to give it to." She turned then. She looked at him. His face was what it had always been, settled, still,
The kind of face that does not give things away easily. The dark coffee eyes, the silver at his temples, the charcoal coat against the April morning. His hands were in his coat pockets. She had learned, in 14 months of watching him move through his own house, what that meant. She did not say so. She turned back to the land. "Goodbye, Min-jun," she said. He remained there for one moment more. Then his footsteps moved away on the sidewalk. She listened to them go. She stood on the land alone.
April light on an empty lot on the south side of Chicago. A woman who had been invisible in the rooms of the powerful for 14 months, standing on ground that had always been hers, in the quiet that belongs to open land, with her hands at her sides and her face to the morning. She was not looking back. She was not looking forward either. Not in the way of someone planning, calculating, preparing for the next thing. She was just here, present, standing on 3/10 of an acre in the city where her grandmother had lived for 41 years, where her grandmother had planted a window box and kept every property tax receipt from 1979 and called a law office twice in 2012 and not been called back. The ground was soft underfoot. The air smelled like rain that had already fallen. A sparrow landed on the back fence, considered the lot with the focused attention of a creature entirely at home in the world it occupied, and then was gone. Zara stood there for a long time after that, long enough to feel the land beneath her, long enough for it to feel familiar, long enough for something that had been held tight for a very long time to begin, slowly, to let go. That was everything. That was more than enough. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it moved you, if you thought about someone while you listened, please share it with them. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Drop a comment and tell me, did you see Min-jun's move coming? And did Zara make the right choice at the end? I read every single one. See you in the next story.